So let's chat here now with Chuck Hoskinson, who's a senior writer of the Washington Examiner. And Chuck, welcome to the program. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Geoff. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Can you please tell me, okay, first let me confirm this. I understand that ISIS now controls an area larger than Great Britain. Is that correct?
I've heard that. That's probably a good.
That's just a good visual. Okay.
That's really a good description of the size of what they control in Iraq and Syria. Mm. Of course, Iraq and Syria are kind of bigger than both kind of bigger than Great Britain each. So.
All right, but I'm just talking about the population. Okay. So, so what are we waiting on? Well, what are we waiting on? I mean, why don't we just cripple them? Well, why can't we seem to cripple them?
That's a good question.
Well, that's why I have you on.
That's
because
a question
what do you think?
A lot of people are asking. Well, the Obama administration's strategy against ISIS, though it is aimed at defeating ISIS,
mm-hmm.
it's aimed at destroying ISIS,
mm-hmm.
it's not in practice a strategy that is geared towards doing that, especially if it relies mostly on U.S. efforts. I mean, the administration has laid down the marker that destroying ISIS is really going to be a job for the locals. I mean, this is a good example of what the White House calls strategic patience, and a lot of people call leading from behind.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially applying some U.S. force to the problem while the diplomatic effort works on trying to get the locals to do the heavy lifting.
So define locals.
Locals as in the Saudis,
okay,
the other Gulf states, the Jordanians, the rebels in Syria, the Iraqi government, the people Turkey, the people who are directly affected by the problem.
Do you think? I mean, so why aren't they doing it? I mean, if they're so, we know Jordan's again. Why don't you think, in your opinion, or are they getting together over there? Because it's getting more and more and more out of control every minute of every day.
Yes, and there are a number of reasons why this isn't what the administration would like to see happen isn't happening. On one hand, most of these countries, in particular Saudi Arabia, I mean, so the Saudis are reinforcing their border with Iraq, but they don't show any desire to send their troops outside
mm-hmm.
of their own borders. The Jordanians, even though there was some noise about this after the pilot was killed, after they haven't shown any desire to send their troops outside their own borders. Most of these countries are looking to shore up their own individual defenses against any assault by ISIS. They're not really eager to go after them outside their own borders. The Iraqis are fighting for their lives. The Syrian government is not one that the United States wants to work with. And then there's also the problem of Iran looming. ISIS is a Sunni extremist group, and the Iranians, a lot of the Sunni governments, like Saudi Arabia, like the Sunnis in Iraq, like the Jordanians, like other Gulf states, they fear Iran almost as much as they fear ISIS, if not more so. And the Iranians are the deadly. The Iranians are the deadly enemies of ISIS, but also the enemies of a lot of the Sunni states. So there's kind of a three-way conflict going on there. Where, I mean, in Iraq, actually, there are a lot of Sunnis who are willing to tolerate ISIS because they fear them less than they fear Iran and Shia sectarian militias.
So, it sounds like they're between a rock and a hard place.
It almost is.
Which one do we fear less?
And I haven't even brought up the subject of the fact that there is support for ISIS in a lot of these countries. There's a lot of support for their extremist ideology in places like Jordan and Turkey.
I know we hate Assad. I mean, and I think we're being a little myopic in that regard. I mean, preventing us from working with them to destroy them.
Well, Assad, Assad bears a lot of the blame for them being there in the first place. And Assad was a brutal dictator. I mean, the problem with Syria There are a lot of analysts who believe this, and I believe this. The problem with Syria would be a lot less of a problem if Assad had been dealt with early on, instead of allowed to linger in power to the point where he's probably going to outlast the Obama administration.
Well, that's that's what we have in the White House. I mean, if you don't, it's like, it seems like he's playing, I don't know, like, it sounds like it's like a game. You're dealing with ruthless animals. I mean, you can't, there's no chatting with ISIS. I mean, it's almost way back like with the Nazis. It's like you just nobody was paying attention. They have to be eradicated. It's not rocket science, and he just won't do it. So people, with his legacy, with his schmegacy, that's all you hear. I mean, it's the way they're handling it. They're obviously not handling it, obviously, and it's by your actions, not by your, by your talking about it. They're not handling it. And when you start saying with like crusaders, and you don't admit to what it is.
You hit on the biggest problem. I mean, the key to destroying ISIS is going after the ideology.
Goodbye.
And if you pretend the ideology, if you can't define the ideology, you can't fight it. And the administration consistently has refused to define the ideology. ISIS practices an extremist form of radical Islamist politics.
Right.
It is integral. I mean, they are using the familiarity of Muslims with the stories and the doctrines of their faith to recruit people.
Right.
And if you don't address that, you're never going to get rid of them. I mean, the biggest problem with ISIS right now is that it's growing.
Right. They're young people
it's not
are
shrinking.
Right.
It's being bombed constantly, and it is growing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So obviously, he's going to be, screwing around for the next, 22 months. And this thing is just going to, grow and grow and grow and grow. And the same answer is going to be given or comments when the next 20 people are, are beheaded. And when you have idiots that come on from the State Department and say the reason why ISIS is killing people is because they don't have jobs. I mean, you kidding? It's like, it's beyond embarrassing. It's what? You don't even say what. You think you heard something that, a 6-month-old said or something. They don't even talk. It's beyond belief.
Well, Egypt is a big country with more than 80 million people, but it's a big country with a fairly small economy. And one of the biggest problems with Egypt today is that its economy really is not capable of providing jobs for everybody who wants to work. But I can pretty much assure you that if ISIS keeps beheading Egyptians, they're going to feel it. they're going to feel something from Egypt, from the Egyptian military, that they're not going to want to feel.
Well, let me ask you this: is there any hope of stability in these nations without a large occupying force? Yes,
but it goes back to the ideological problem. A lot of these nations I mean, there's not a lot of democracy in the Arab world and in the Middle East. I mean, I won't belabor that because people have been talking about that for decades. And we are decades behind the curve in terms of encouraging democracy in those countries. I mean, if you had a free election in any one of these countries today, the most likely winner would probably be an Islamist party whose ideology is closer to that of ISIS than it is to that of any political organization in the United States. Because they're just the kind of people who believe in the kind of secular, democratic, rule of law, pro-human rights governance that we in America believe in. They hardly exist at all. So, I mean, that's where this needs to go. But the first step on that would be to stop getting these governments, stop the governments that are playing a double game, like Qatar, which is, even though they're providing aircraft to the coalition that's bombing ISIS, they're also providing money to the Islamist extremists who follow the same ideology.
Well, they play both ends. Let me ask you this last question. Where are we with Iran right now? I know Netanyahu's going to come in and tell us that we're nuts, that the plan is terrible. But where are we right now with them?
The talks are going to resume. The negotiators are under pressure to get a deal that will pass muster in Congress, because if they, I've talked to a lot of the Democratic senators, a lot of the supporters of this bipartisan sanctions legislation. If there's no progress, I think you will see sanctions legislation moving in Congress, and the likelihood is that it will pass over a presidential veto. It will. Obama will not be able to stop it. So this is a month to make some progress, or else.
All right. Well, I hope. Boy, we sure need some work. All right, Chuck. Thanks so much for coming on, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.